Yes, hi folks. Yes, the deadly Nipah virus was found in the Wuhan lab. And yes, that lab was partially funded by America. And yes, through Dr. Fauci. Now, how dangerously absurd was that? To fund your enemy, Communist China, on dangerous virus research on their soil is completely insane. And of course, that insanity came through the World Trade Organization, another branch of the UN, and globalists like Clinton and others who naively thought that free trade would lead communist China to democracy. But in the adult world, the following was easily foreseeable.
We want to take a look at what's taking place with China right now. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki would not comment on reports that China tested a nuclear-capable hypersonic missile. She instead had this to say. Watch this.
We've made clear our concern about the military capabilities that the PRC continues to pursue. And we have been consistent in our approach with China. We welcome stiff competition, but do we not?
We welcome stiff competition. Really? This is not a business. This is not commerce. This is military warfare, you dimwit.
We do not want that competition to veer into conflict, and that is certainly what we convey privately as well.
China launched the missile back in August, according to reports. It is denying it, though. Instead, the CCP saying that it was testing a spacecraft. Joining me right now is Fox News senior strategic analyst, General Jack Keane. General, we've talked about this in terms of the capability of the CCP for some time now, and you were the first on this program to take note of the strengthening of China's Navy in particular, the fact that it is actually bigger.
And their army is twice as big
than the United States is. What are your thoughts on this hypersonic missile launched?
Yeah, well, first of all, hypersonic missiles, we've been talking about them for a number of years. China has operationalized conventional hypersonic missiles that are capable of taking down our maritime fleet in the Pacific and literally all of our bases, and we don't really have adequate defenses against the missiles because of the very nature of those missiles that come into the zone from space, and they're flying at 5 times the speed of sound, and they have complete maneuverability to avoid a missile hitting it. So Russia also has developed that capability, and the United States is rapidly testing that capability. We are clearly behind China. But
we are clearly behind China, he said, yet they still allow, or they still help China with virus research.
What makes this newsworthy is the fact that China has taken that hypersonic missile, strapped it to a rocket, and orbited the Earth with it, and it's capable of housing a nuclear weapon.
So they could take anyone out, including New Zealand and Australia, at their will.
According to the Financial Times, there's no confirmation of this by China, and there's no confirmation of this by the United States, and our audience has to understand that. But if true, that has changed the nature then of nuclear proliferation in the world writ large. The United States and the Soviet Union agreed during the Cold War not to nuclearize space. In other words, not to have satellites or space stations with nuclear weapons. That was an agreement we entered into. China appears to be opening up a new chapter to weaponize space and to nuclearize it. Now,
and they allow the Nipah virus to exist in Wuhan. It's completely absurd.
Nipah virus is 80% lethal. So this is not, if you didn't like the pandemic that was just 1% lethal, this thing they're working on in December 2019 has an 80% lethality. It needs to be stopped.
Welcome back to Unfiltered. It's a shocking claim you may have missed. If you thought COVID was bad, just wait. There's apparently more lethal viruses in the pipeline. Joining me now to make sense of it all is Dr. Stephen Quay. Doctor, thanks for joining me. I really appreciate you taking the time.
No problem. Glad to be here, Dan.
So, Doctor, you had done some work on the Wuhan lab, and you had discovered some evidence of Nipah virus. Can you explain to our audience what that is, why finding remnants or sequences of that in the lab matters, and what kind of virus this is what was in the Wuhan lab?
Sure. So just the Twitter version of the Nipah virus, it starts in bats, and then they eat fruit, typically a guana fruit or something, and then they sort of go to the bathroom on the ground, and then the pigs will eat the dropped fruit as well. And then if we eat the pigs or come in contact with the pigs, we can get the virus. It does go in through the lungs like SARS-CoV-2, but it has a special predilection for the brain. So encephalitis is a very early symptom from it. And as you said, it ranges between 50 and 80% lethal. So what we did was when patients were sampled in December at a hospital in Wuhan, samples sent to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, they were put on a special sequencing machine. That's American technology, actually, that made that sequencing machine. It generates copies of everything in the sample, but it's so sensitive, it generates copies of everything in the laboratory. So we actually found 20 different things that shouldn't have been in the patient. We found honeysuckle genes, okay, the plant. And so what I did was I looked at research publications from the Wuhan Institute of Virology over the last 2 years. I was able to identify 18 out of 20 samples associated with prior publications. The two I couldn't was a deadly influenza virus and the Nipah virus.
Now, folks, listen carefully in the following little bit.
And we found about a third of the virus.
We found about a third of the virus.
In a vector, as it's called.
In a vector, as it's called.
Which is a tool that scientists use in the laboratory.
Which is a tool that scientists use in the laboratory.
To make large copies of something.
To make large copies of something.
As if they're going to make a vaccine or...
As if they're going to make a vaccine.
Or to make something else.
Or to make something else. Yes, a vaccine to protect themselves and a bioweapon to kill their enemies.
And this is pretty unmistakable. I mean, this is a smoking gun for the Nipah virus. This is what you'd expect to have seen, say, 2 years ago for SARS-CoV-2.
So, Doctor, I mean, obviously it must concern you that this lab has a history of safety violations, especially given now we're relatively sure that the coronavirus, COVID-19, leaked from there, that they're working on a virus with an 80, and I want to be clear, 80 up to 80%, not 80% lethality rate. So were they possibly working on making this virus more powerful? And, is this the kind of lab that has the security profile to even handle something like this, even if they were working on gain of function?
Yeah, so let's be clear. There are labs all over the world working on these kinds of viruses at these levels of lethality. There's kind of 3 levels of laboratory, what's called BLSA-2, which is sort of a dental office, BLSA-3, which is a little upgrade, and then BLSA-4, which is the space suits with the oxygen in the ceiling. So Nipah is supposed to be worked on BLSA-4. We found it in a building in Wuhan that only has a 2 or a 3 rating. So they're clearly kind of over the edge, if I could call it that, in terms of the kind of thing they're doing and the kind of laboratory security, biosecurity that they have.
Yeah, this is frightening stuff. Dr. Stephen Quay, thanks a lot for taking the time. I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Take care.
You got it. Folks, that's really unbelievably frightening stuff. A virus with an 80% lethality rate in the Wuhan lab.
Yeah, frightening for sure. And not many are reporting this. Now, folks, I often wonder if the globalist left will ever realize that communist China plays the long game, that they are our enemy now and always have been. But hey, we use the right pronouns. Anyway, folks, I posted links to Dr. Quay's website and to Dan Bongino's radio show where he talks about the story some more.